Ladies and gentlemen, let me begin with a question that should grab your attention right away. What happens when two of the world's largest populations, two of the fastest growing economies, and two of the most ambitious nations decide to align their interests in shaping the future global order? The answer is simple. The balance of power shifts, and it shifts dramatically. Today, I want to talk about the China-India partnership in the New World Order, because whether America likes it or not, the global economy is no longer centered on Washington or Wall Street. It is gravitating eastward toward Asia, where growth, innovation, and real productivity are taking place. Let us begin by looking at the undeniable force that arises when you bring together more than 1/3 of humanity under the umbrella of cooperation. China and India are not just two countries on a map. They are two civilizations with thousands of years of history, culture, and resilience. Together, they represent over 2.8 billion people. That is not merely a number. It is a tidal wave of human potential, creativity, and economic energy. When such massive populations start aligning their goals, they don't just shape their own destinies, they reshape the world order itself. Imagine the sheer magnitude of markets, the demand for goods and services, the hunger for infrastructure, education, technology, and healthcare that arises when over 2 billion people push forward. This is not a ripple in the global economy. It is a seismic shift, one that the West can no longer afford to ignore. Consider the sheer size of the consumer base. Every innovation in technology, every leap in healthcare, every expansion in energy capacity will find its largest testing ground in Asia. When companies look for future growth, they are not looking at Europe with its aging populations, nor at America with its declining middle class and mounting debt. They are looking at Asia, where billions of people are rising from poverty into the middle class, demanding better lives and greater opportunities. This surge is what creates economic gravity, pulling investment, talent, and trade flows eastward. And here's the hook. If you are not watching this population powerhouse, you are already missing the biggest wealth creation story of our time. Now, let's put this into perspective. The United States built its dominance in the 20th century on the back of a growing population, industrial expansion, and an unshakable faith in the dollar. But today, America's demographics are slowing, debt is spiraling, and productivity is lagging behind. Meanwhile, China and India are enjoying the dividends of youth, energy, and expansion. Their populations are not just growing, but becoming increasingly educated, technologically advanced, and globally connected. That combination is dynamite. It means more engineers, more entrepreneurs, more innovators, and more consumers ready to engage in the global economy. This is where real growth originates, from people, from skills, from production, not from printing money or issuing government debt. What's even more compelling is the scale of urbanization taking place. Hundreds of millions in both China and India are moving from rural areas into cities, creating new hubs of commerce and opportunity. Think about what that means. New roads, new housing, new factories, new schools, and new digital networks. Every brick laid, every smartphone purchased, every financial account opened adds momentum to an already unstoppable trend. When you multiply that by billions of people, you start to understand why the balance of power is shifting eastward. The West is stagnating while Asia is exploding with vitality. Another hook you need to grasp is the compounding effect of cooperation. On their own, China and India are formidable. Together, they are transformative. By combining manufacturing power with technological prowess, resource demand with innovation, and labor force with market size, they create a synergy that is larger than the sum of its parts. This is not incremental change. This is exponential growth potential. And when exponential growth takes root in populations of this size, the rest of the world has no choice but to adjust. Let me drive the point home with a motivational edge. Stop underestimating the power of numbers. Stop thinking of population size as just a statistic. In economic terms, people are both producers and consumers. They create and they demand. When billions of people rise together, they fuel growth from both sides of the equation. That is why the China-India partnership in this new world order is not just significant, it is destiny in motion. And if you fail to see it, if you remain locked in the illusion that America's dominance is eternal, then you will be caught flat-footed when the reality of this shift hits the global economy like a tidal wave. The smart ones will prepare, position themselves, and ride this surge. The rest will be swept away by the sheer momentum of two nations whose combined populations are rewriting the rules of power and prosperity in the 21st century. While much of the West has chosen to build its modern prosperity on the quicksand of borrowing, consumption, and debt, China and India are charting a very different course, one that focuses on real production, real output, and genuine value creation. This is not just an economic distinction. It is the dividing line between nations that are building the future and those that are consuming the remnants of their past. America has grown addicted to the illusion of wealth, printing dollars and borrowing trillions to maintain a lifestyle it has not earned, while the East is proving that growth grounded in productivity and savings will always outlast growth fueled by credit. The hook here is undeniable. Paper wealth disappears when confidence fades, but tangible production and disciplined savings build legacies that last. Think about how wealth is created. True wealth is not a number on a bank statement inflated by government stimulus. True wealth is the goods and services produced, the factories built, the infrastructure laid down, and the innovations that improve lives. China and India are investing heavily in these fundamentals. Manufacturing plants, highways, ports, and digital economies are sprouting across their landscapes, each one a brick in the foundation of enduring economic strength. Meanwhile, in the United States, resources are squandered on speculation, asset bubbles, and financial engineering. One economy is creating, the other is pretending, and history has always rewarded the creators. Now, consider the role of savings. A society that saves is a society that invests, and a society that invests builds for tomorrow rather than borrowing from it. China's high savings rate has been the backbone of its economic expansion, allowing it to fund massive infrastructure and technological advancements without leaning entirely on foreign capital. India, while still behind in this respect, is rapidly building a culture of investment and financial literacy, creating the conditions for more sustainable long-term growth. Contrast that with America, where saving is almost seen as an inconvenience and debt has become the default. Credit cards, student loans, government deficits, this is not strength. It is fragility masquerading as prosperity. The motivation here is simple. No empire in history has survived by consuming more than it produces, and no nation has thrived by saving less than it spends. What's even more telling is how these different approaches impact resilience. When global shocks occur, economies built on debt crumble under the weight of obligations they can no longer service. But economies grounded in production and savings can weather storms because they have real assets and real wealth to rely on. China and India are not immune to challenges, but their foundation is far sturdier than America's house of cards. The dollar can be devalued, interest rates can destroy bond markets, and Wall Street can collapse under its own excesses. But factories producing real goods and populations saving real income cannot be erased by a market correction. That is why the center of gravity is shifting east. It is a shift from illusion to substance. Here's the hook you must internalize. Debt-driven prosperity is temporary. Production-driven prosperity is permanent. America has chosen the path of instant gratification, fueling its economy with cheap money and endless borrowing. China and India, despite their flaws, are choosing the harder, more disciplined road of production, savings, and incremental progress. And discipline always outlasts indulgence. If you want to know where the future belongs, look at where real things are being made, where wealth is being stored in savings and investments, not in IOUs and credit expansions. For anyone listening, the lesson is personal as well as global. You cannot build lasting wealth in your own life by relying on debt and living beyond your means, and nations are no different. If you want strength, if you want stability, if you want the ability to seize opportunity, you must produce more than you consume and save more than you spend. That is exactly why China and India are rising and America is stagnating. The New World Order will not be written by the largest debtor nation in history. It will be shaped by those who understand that production and savings, not illusions and promises, are the only real foundations of prosperity. And when the day of reckoning comes for debt-driven economies, the disciplined nations will not just survive, they will lead. For decades, the United States has enjoyed a unique privilege, the dominance of the U.S. dollar as the world's reserve currency. This status has allowed America to borrow, spend, and inflate far beyond what any other country could sustain, because the rest of the world has been forced to hold and use dollars for international trade. But here is the uncomfortable truth. Every privilege that is abused eventually collapses under its own weight, and the dollar is no exception. China and India, by choosing to settle more trade in their own currencies, by diversifying their reserves into gold and alternative assets, are sending a clear signal to the world. The monopoly of the dollar is weakening. The hook here is unavoidable. When trust in the dollar fades, so does America's ability to dictate the terms of the global economy. Think about why the dollar rose to this position in the first place. After World War II, the U.S. was the world's manufacturing powerhouse, the creditor to nations, the holder of vast gold reserves. The dollar was strong because it was backed by real economic strength and the confidence that came with it. But over the decades, America abandoned those strengths. It outsourced production. It ran up massive trade deficits. It consumed more than it produced, and it severed the tie between the dollar and gold in 1971. What remains is a currency supported not by substance, but by habit, inertia, and military might. And habits change. Inertia ends. Military dominance does not last forever. That is why the actions of China and India matter so much. They are accelerating the world's move toward alternatives. Consider how powerful this trend becomes when two of the largest economies align their financial strategies. China has been building its Belt and Road Initiative, creating networks of trade and infrastructure across Asia, Africa, and Europe, often conducted outside the dollar system. India has been increasing bilateral agreements to trade in rupees or in local currencies. Both nations are stockpiling gold at record levels, a clear vote of no confidence in fiat currencies, and particularly the dollar. When two nations of this scale begin setting the standard, others follow. Smaller economies, tired of being vulnerable to U.S. sanctions, Currency manipulation or Federal Reserve policies find security in alternatives. One by one, countries start to realize they no longer have to bow to the dollar to participate in global trade. That realization is a turning point, and it's happening now. Here's the critical hook. The dollar's dominance has been America's greatest export. It allowed the U.S. to import real goods while exporting only paper. It enabled the government to finance endless wars, welfare programs, and deficits without the immediate consequences other nations face. If that privilege disappears, the consequences will hit with brutal force. Inflation will no longer be easily exported abroad. Interest rates will rise as demand for treasuries falls. The cost of America's lifestyle, its consumption, its entitlements, its military reach will suddenly have to be paid for with real production rather than borrowed money. That day of reckoning is not some distant fantasy. It is the natural outcome of what we see unfolding between China, India, and the rest of the world. When you understand this, you recognize why gold has become so important again. Gold is not just a shiny metal. It is the universal money that cannot be printed, inflated, or devalued at will. China and India understand this, which is why their central banks are buying it in record quantities. Gold represents independence from the dollar system, security in a storm, and credibility in global trade. As they accumulate gold and settle more trade outside the dollar, they are laying the groundwork for a future where the U.S. currency is no longer the unquestioned king. And once confidence breaks, the fall of the dollar will be swift. Confidence is like a dam. It holds steady for decades, but when it cracks, the collapse is sudden and devastating. The motivational edge here is simply stop believing that the dollar is invincible. Nothing in history has ever been permanent, not empires, not currencies, not global orders. The British pound once ruled the world, and now it is just another currency. The same fate awaits the dollar, and the actions of China and India are accelerating that process. If you prepare for it, if you align yourself with real assets, with sound money, and with the new centers of growth, you will not just survive this shift, you will thrive in it. But if you cling to the illusion that America's printing press can sustain its power forever, you will find yourself blindsided when the world finally decides it no longer needs the dollar. The writing is on the wall, and those who choose to ignore it will pay the price. When you examine the flow of global trade, investment, and innovation, you begin to notice something undeniable. The center of economic gravity is moving eastward. For generations, the West, particularly the United States, was the engine that pulled the world forward. Factories hummed, innovation flourished, and capital poured into Western markets. But today, the map is being redrawn. The fastest growth, the most dynamic markets, and the most ambitious infrastructure projects are not in New York, London, or Berlin. They are in Shanghai, Bangalore, Shenzhen, and Mumbai. The hook that cannot be ignored is this: the future belongs to the regions where real growth is taking place, not the ones clinging to the illusion of past dominance. Take investment flows as an example. Multinational corporations are no longer asking where they can find the cheapest credit. They are asking where they can find the biggest markets, the most skilled labor, and the fastest expansion. The answer is increasingly Asia. China has positioned itself as the manufacturing hub of the world, and India is rising as the global leader in technology and services. Together, these two giants are creating an ecosystem of opportunity that attracts capital like a magnet. Every new factory built, every start-up launched, every trade route developed adds more weight to this gravitational pull. It is not theory, it is reality. visible in the decisions of businesses, investors, and governments worldwide. Now consider infrastructure. In the United States, bridges are crumbling, airports are outdated, and political gridlock prevents serious investment in rebuilding. Meanwhile, China is constructing high-speed rail networks that span entire regions, building ports and power plants across continents through the Belt and Road Initiative, and rolling out cutting-edge smart cities. India is expanding its highways, airports, and digital networks at a pace that would put most Western countries to shame. Infrastructure is not just about roads and buildings. It is the backbone of productivity. And productivity is what drives sustainable growth. Where do you think the economic energy will flow? To regions stuck in decline, or to regions racing ahead with modern systems built for the future? This shift in gravity is also evident in demographics. The West is aging, populations are shrinking, workforces are contracting, and entitlement burdens are rising. That is a recipe for stagnation. In contrast, India boasts one of the youngest workforces in the world, and China, even as it faces demographic challenges of its own, has already established a deeply embedded culture of industrial discipline and technological advancement. A young, ambitious, and skilled population is a force multiplier in economic growth. It fuels innovation, consumption, and investment simultaneously. That is why the East is not just catching up, it is overtaking. Another hook lies in the psychology of global investors. For decades, Western markets were seen as the safest, most profitable places to put money. Today, that confidence is being eroded. Trillions in debt, endless monetary expansion, and political dysfunction are shaking faith in Western stability. Meanwhile, the East is seen as the land of opportunity despite its challenges, because the growth is real, the momentum is visible, and the long-term story is undeniable. Confidence is shifting, and once confidence shifts, money follows. Once money follows, innovation follows. And once innovation follows, leadership shifts permanently. Think also about technology. Silicon Valley was once the undisputed crown jewel of innovation, but the dominance is no longer absolute. China has produced tech giants in e-commerce, fintech, and artificial intelligence that rival or surpass their Western counterparts. India has become the global hub of IT services, software, and digital talent. These are not minor achievements. They are signals that the intellectual and technological capital of the world is diversifying, moving to where the energy and ambition are strongest. Technology is the currency of the future, and Asia is minting it at scale. The motivational call here is simple but urgent. Recognize where the future is being built. Do not let nostalgia blind you to the reality that the global economy is tilting eastward. While the West lives on borrowed time and borrowed money, Asia is laying foundations that will last for decades. The gravitational pull of growth is already changing trade routes, investment flows, and innovation hubs. If you align yourself with this momentum, you ride the wave of the future. If you ignore it, you will be left behind in the stagnation of economies that refuse to adapt. The question is not whether the economic center will shift. It already has. The question is whether you will shift with it or be buried under its weight. When most people look at China and India, they see two nations defined by rivalry, border disputes, competition for regional influence, and contrasting political systems. Yet what is often missed is the bigger picture. Both countries understand that the global order is shifting, and survival in this new era requires cooperation where it matters most. Economic partnership, even in the midst of political disagreements, creates leverage neither could achieve alone. This is the hook that demands attention when adversaries recognize that unity amplifies power, the entire global system feels the tremor. China has unmatched strength in manufacturing, logistics, and large-scale industrial planning. India has unmatched strength in technology software and a young, dynamic workforce. These are not overlapping advantages. They are complementary. When China builds the hardware, India can write the software. When China lays down roads, ports, and railways, India can supply the digital infrastructure that rides on top of it. Together, they create a holistic economic engine that integrates the physical with the digital, the industrial with the technological. And when such synergy begins to operate at the scale of billions of people, no Western economy can compete with that scope of efficiency and innovation. This is not speculation. It is already happening. Trade between the two nations has grown despite tensions because business and economics recognize realities that politics cannot always deny. Companies in India rely on Chinese components and machinery. Chinese firms invest in India's startups and digital platforms. Even when governments clash diplomatically, the invisible hand of commerce continues to bind the two nations in ways that serve their long-term interests. And here lies the motivational lesson. Strength often comes not from eliminating rivalry, but from harnessing it into productive coexistence. They don't need to love each other to understand that cooperation in economics gives both of them greater leverage against a global order long dominated by the United States and Europe. Consider also the symbolism of such cooperation. For decades, the world has been told that progress requires following the Western model, democracy aligned with capitalism, free markets aligned with dollar dependence. But when China and India, two nations with distinct systems and distinct paths, manage to collaborate, they send a powerful signal. There is no single model for success. They prove that emerging powers can shape their own path without bowing to Washington or Brussels. This challenges the ideological monopoly the West has enjoyed for so long, and it inspires countless other nations in Asia, Africa, and Latin America to seek independence from Western dictates. The hook here is sharp. Unity between China and India is not just about economics. It is about rewriting the narrative of what development and power look like in the 21st century. Their cooperation also gives them strength in global institutions, whether it is the BRICS Alliance, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, or other regional blocs. The combined weight of China and India tips the scales. One voice may be ignored, but two voices representing nearly 3 billion people cannot be dismissed so easily. Together, they can demand reforms in global trade, finance, and governance that weaken Western dominance. They can advocate for alternative payment systems, challenge the dollar's supremacy, and build coalitions that resist U.S. sanctions and pressure. Unity transforms them from regional players into architects of a new world order. Cooperation is not just about what China and India gain. It is about what America loses. The United States has thrived on dividing rivals, playing one against the other, and keeping emerging economies dependent on its financial system. But when rivals refuse to be divided, when they recognize that their common interest outweighs their differences, the old strategy collapses. United China and India strip America of one of its most powerful tools, the ability to isolate nations and force them into compliance. That shift changes the entire game. For anyone paying attention, the lesson is deeply motivational. Even in your own life or business, cooperation with those you may view as competitors can create opportunities larger than anything you could achieve alone. On a global scale, that principle is being demonstrated in real time by China and India. They are proving that unity, even in small doses, can unlock massive potential and accelerate the decline of outdated hierarchies. The future will not be shaped by nations that cling to grudges at the expense of growth. It will be shaped by those that learn to leverage differences into complementary strengths. And when two of the largest nations on Earth begin to master that lesson, the global order is not just shifting, it is being rebuilt from the ground up. The most powerful truth about the rise of China and India is that it is not simply a story about nations and governments. It is a story that has direct consequences for every individual who chooses to either ignore the shift or prepare for it. Global changes are not abstract theories. They filter down into everyday life through job opportunities, investment returns, purchasing power, and the security of your savings. The hook here is straightforward. If the economic world order is being rewritten, then your financial future will be rewritten with it, whether you recognize it or not. For decades, people in the West have lived under the assumption that the US dollar will always be strong, that American markets will always be the safest, and that prosperity is a birthright rather than something earned. But history teaches us otherwise. Every empire that believed its dominance was permanent eventually learned how quickly confidence evaporates. The British pound was once the global standard, yet it lost its crown when Britain's debts mounted and its empire faded. Today, America is repeating the same mistakes on a grander scale, borrowing endlessly, inflating recklessly, and exporting paper promises instead of real wealth. When China and India rise, they are not just advancing their own futures, they are exposing the fragility of the American illusion. And for anyone listening, that is the warning shot. This is why preparation is no longer optional. If you cling to the old order, if you keep your wealth entirely in dollars, if you rely on debt-fueled systems that only function as long as the world believes in the Federal Reserve's magic, then you are setting yourself up for disappointment. But if you take action, if you diversify into real assets, if you position yourself in industries tied to the new centers of growth, if you recognize that savings and production are the only true foundations of wealth, then you place yourself on the right side of history. The motivational lesson is urgency. You cannot stop the tide, but you can ride it if you see it coming. Think about how this applies personally. When China and India increase trade in their own currencies, the dollar's purchasing power erodes. That means imported goods in America become more expensive, inflation rises, and living standards decline. If you're unprepared, this feels like a sudden crisis. But if you've anticipated it, if you've hedged with gold, diversified internationally, or aligned with industries that benefit from Asian growth, then the same global shift becomes your opportunity. The very event that crushes others can be the force that lifts you higher. That is the difference between being caught off guard and being strategically prepared. There is also a psychological dimension. Most people find comfort in believing that things will always remain as they are, that the status quo will somehow hold. But that comfort is a trap. The real strength lies in facing uncomfortable truths early, in acknowledging that America's prosperity is no longer guaranteed, and in embracing the reality that power is shifting eastward. This is not a reason to panic. It is a reason to adapt. The winners of tomorrow will not be those who deny change, but those who anticipate it and act with clarity. The hook you need to remember is this: fortune always favors the prepared, never the complacent. So when you look at the China-India partnership, don't view it only as a geopolitical event. See it as a mirror reflecting your own choices. Are you aligning yourself with growth, production, and savings, or are you entrusting your future to debt, promises, and illusions? The nations that adapt will thrive. The individuals who adapt will thrive, but those who refuse to see the writing on the wall will face the same fate as the empires and currencies of the past. Forgotten, diminished, and left behind, the New World Order is not a theory. It is unfolding now, and it will reward those who prepare and punish those who don't. The choice is yours, but time is running out to make it.